Welcome to the show. Several weeks ago, I did a story about math, multiplying decimals. The story was called, Is Something Very Wrong with the Country? And surprisingly, to a degree, a story about basic math got almost 1 million views and generated hundreds of emails from folks all across the country saying, I teach middle school, I teach high school, I teach college, and they don't know basic math. They are completely dependent on calculators, and conceptually something very bad is happening here. And my interest in that story was essentially, if such basic skills are missing, of course we can't expect American voters to meaningfully engage with nuanced and complicated arguments about tariffs or climate change or whatever. Sort of like, if education is failing this badly, why do we end up shocked that people fall for Facebook disinformation propaganda articles? Well, I have another example of this that I want to talk about today, and it goes very much to one of the sort of en vogue topics right now, which is raw milk, raw dairy. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. nominated for Secretary of Health and Human Services. What about vaccines? What about hydroxychloroquine? What about red dye? You know, all this sort of stuff. What we're going to look at here is a conversation involving content creator Dr. Idz and a gentleman who goes by the name Metabolic Mike. Now, let me kind of set this up for you. A talking point that's spreading is we know raw milk isn't really dangerous because most hospitalizations for foodborne illness come from other foods, not from raw dairy. They come either from pasteurized dairy or fresh vegetables, as Donald Trump says, or meat or something else. And there's really two issues here that are important to contend with. And again, our approach is, if people don't even understand what I'm about to explain, how can they meaningfully assess the risk of raw dairy? There's two issues. Number one is that milk is primarily connected, raw milk is primarily connected to listeria. Dairy in general is connected to listeria. So looking at salmonella or other things, it's kind of deceptive if what we want to focus in on is raw versus pasteurized dairy. But the really deceptive part that you're going to see in this video is that way more people are eating raw vegetables than dairy. So to understand the relative risk, you have to first consider that the number of people having the raw vegetables is so much bigger than the number of people having raw milk that you have to account for that. And I'll give you an example and then we'll watch the video. If 1 million people eat vegetables daily and 10,000 people consume raw milk daily, and half the hospitalizations come from the vegetables, but 5% of the hospitalizations come from the milk, even though the numbers are lower as a share of hospitalizations for the raw milk, relatively speaking, the raw milk is way more dangerous. And I probably didn't even explain that well, but here is a really good clip from Tic Tac with Dr. Idz sort of respectfully debating this guy who goes by the name Metabolic Mike. And to Metabolic Mike's credit, he acknowledges at the end of this short clip the error in his analysis where he goes, hey, foodborne illness from fresh vegetables is way more common. So let's take a look.
Look at the data from both the CDC and the FGA. Dairy as a whole is not the leading cause of foodborne illness. And we're categorizing unpasteurized dairy in that. Leafy vegetables contribute to 49% of the hospitalizations.
It's about 1% of the US adult population report consuming some form of raw dairy once a week, not daily, once a week. That's from Lando et al. In 2022. Over 25% of US adults consume one portion of leafy green veg a day. So a quarter consume leafy green veg every day. 1% of adults consume some form of raw dairy once a week. So that's a huge difference. Yeah. Using the absolute numbers for two different populations where one number is drastically smaller is actually not going to inform the public as to their relative risk of illness. Right. In 2014, there's a literature review which I cited 2 videos ago.
Mhm.
The authors looked at over, I think it was 121 infectious outbreaks. They estimated that raw dairy consumption holds a 150 times greater risk versus pasteurized dairy. Can you concede to the facts that it's an objective fact that raw dairy is at least 50 times more dangerous than pasteurized dairy?
Yeah, I believe
Okay,
that.
fine.
Yeah.
So Metabolic Mike says, yeah, you're right. Now, why is this so relevant to politics? Why is this so relevant to RFK Jr. and MAHA, Make America Healthy Again? How can we in any way value the people online who show up and say raw milk is perfectly fine if they don't even understand the base rate comparison? If 1% of the population is having raw milk once a week and 25% of the population is having raw vegetables every day, so it's 25% versus 1%, 7 times a week versus once a week, you have to account for that staggeringly lopsided base rate to then be able to say on a use adjusted basis, which is actually more dangerous. Now, you might get the real numbers, understand the real numbers, and say, hey, you know what? I am willing to accept that risk. The risk of getting foodborne illness from raw milk rather than spinach is 50 or 100 or 150 times higher. And I'm okay with that because it still feels low enough, or I just love that sweet, sweet raw milk first thing in the morning and I'm willing to accept. But if you can't even conceptualize the relative risk, of what use is your confidence that it's not really so risky that you should be worried about yourself or your kids or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pushing it? Now, I'll even concede to you the raw milk part isn't even really the most concerning one. I would say that the data around vaccine safety, similarly, with people not understanding base rate differences and all of these different things, with all of this stuff, if we don't have a shared basis in fact, and the fact comes, of course, from understanding the data, the conversations are largely a waste of time. And if you look on the internet, you will see that indeed the conversations about these issues are a big waste of time when half the population or more doesn't even understand the numbers. If you understand the numbers, now we can have an informed conversation about the risk we're willing to accept. And one other note on this. If the relative risk stuff is interesting to you, a year ago, 2 years ago, I interviewed a professor who specializes in, are we able to accurately assess risk as humans? Baruch Fischoff is his name. Check out that interview if you find this stuff interesting. Really nice job there by Dr. Ids, plainly laying it out and getting Metabolic Mike to acknowledge, yeah, the raw milk is at least 50 times as dangerous. That's true. If you're still using a free email service, your emails are often being scanned and tracked even after you delete them. Companies use the data to know everything about you and show you ads, even your most personal communications. That's why I recommend you check out StartMail. Unlike free email services, our sponsor StartMail never scans or tracks your emails. It also blocks tracking pixels, which companies and hackers use to capture your IP address. And when you delete an email in StartMail, it is gone forever, keeping your information private. StartMail allows you to create unlimited email aliases, protecting your identity and reducing spam. This lets you use different email addresses for different purposes, like newsletters or shopping. Plus, StartMail lets you encrypt every email, even if the recipient doesn't use encryption. Switching is easy. You can migrate all your existing emails and contacts with just a few clicks. StartMail also offers a business plan with unlimited domains, advanced phishing protection, and shared aliases for seamless team collaboration. Go to startmail.com/Pacman to get 50% off your first year. That's about $2 a month for a personal plan or about $3 a month for a business plan. Plus, get 25% off additional accounts for team members. The link is in the description.